Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, new details on the Poway synagogue shooting. The Sheriff's Department unseals documents that describe the alleged shooter's actions before the attack. Voters might be asked to approve more money for affordable housing in San Diego. Why that drew a crowd of demonstrators to City Hall.
First of all, the numbers of properties and the expense of purchasing those properties would be extremely expensive. The question also is where would those people move? Could they move anywhere else in Del Mar? There just isn't the space.
The practicality and politics of managed retreat. Cities like Del Mar weigh their options as they face the threat of rising sea levels. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, July 31st. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. An El Cajon police officer has been cleared of negligence in the shooting death of Alfred Alongo. A jury in San Diego reached the verdict this afternoon. Officer Richard Gonzales shot Alongo 4 times during an encounter in 2016. The officer said he thought Alongo pointed a gun at him, but it turned out to be a vaping device. Alongo's sister had called police because he was having a mental crisis. The shooting led to protest over claims of excessive force. San Diego is one step closer to reforming the Community Review Board for the city's police department. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar shows us what happened at today's city council meeting.
San Diego needs a community review board on police practices that is independent, accountable, and includes youth voices because we need to end youth criminalization and the school-to-prison pipeline.
Dozens of young people showed up at the City Council's Rules Committee Wednesday to show their support for a proposed charter amendment that would change the Community Review Board of the San Diego Police Department.
In order for us to be more comfortable with the police and even have that connection with the police, we need to know that there can be any consequences if necessary with the police, just in case, so their power isn't complete, it isn't total.
The board is currently made up of appointees from the mayor's office and reviews investigations done by the police department's internal affairs unit. One proposed amendment adds 2 youth members to the board and takes the power to appoint commission members away from the mayor. It also allows the commission to conduct wholly independent investigations of all officer-involved shootings and deaths in police custody.
An independent commission takes all the politics out of it. It creates more transparency, and it reestablishes a connection with the police department, the police officers assigned to serve and protect communities, and the communities they serve and protect.
The Rules Committee voted to move the amendment to its Public Safety Committee. It also voted to move another proposal authored by City Attorney Maura Elliott. Currently, the city attorney's office provides legal counsel to both the police department and the review board. Her proposal calls for the board to have its own independent legal counsel. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
New today, unsealed search warrants are providing information about what led up to the deadly shooting at a Poway synagogue. 1 person was killed and 3 others wounded after a gunman opened fire in April. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more on what was revealed.
Unsealed search warrants are giving us a better look at the actions of a 19-year-old Cal State San Marcos student charged in the attack. We now know one of the guns used in the shooting was purchased at San Diego Guns in Mission Valley. Superior Court records show a Smith & Wesson AR-15 rifle was bought there before the attack. We reached out to the owner of San Diego Guns, who says he is not commenting on the more than $900 purchase. Investigators say a handgun was also used during the attack, but it's unclear how the suspect got that firearm. Investigators executed a search warrant at the synagogue where the shooting happened. A surveillance system was recovered that investigators say shows graphic images of the shooting where people were shot while they were praying. Investigators found the suspect purchased tactical equipment, including a vest, helmet, and a GoPro camera on Amazon. The warrant also referenced an online post by the alleged killer that promoted the murder of Jewish people. A search of the suspect's text messages found a reference to the man accused of killing 51 people in New Zealand in March. That shooter also posted an anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim commentary, which the Poway shooting suspect described as spot on with everything. Now, investigators also served search warrants on the suspect's home where laptops, cell phones, hard drives, and other equipment was recovered. The suspect's school records, emails, social media accounts, and bank records are also being combed through. We know that from the warrants, investigators have been looking to see if the suspect worked with anyone else to plan the shooting. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Thanks, Matt. Tonight, the Navy is looking for the pilot of a jet that crashed in Central California. The Navy announced the crash happened around 10 this morning near its air station in China Lake. That's in the Mojave Desert near Bakersfield. The status of the pilot is unknown and the cause of the crash is under investigation. In Otay Mesa, groundbreaking today for the final leg of State Route 11. The extension will link nearby freeways to the future Otay Mesa port of entry. Caltrans and Sandag are teaming up on the $100 million project. It will take 2 years to complete and include a 4-lane toll road. Money for affordable housing may be on the ballot next year. The city of San Diego began the process today with crowds of hundreds turning out to voice their support. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has details on the proposed ballot measure and what was decided. Andrew.
Ebony, the proposal is to raise $900 million to build more affordable housing in San Diego. Those dollars would be issued as a bond to be approved by voters. The campaign for this measure is just getting started. Activists held a march today in support of the affordable housing measure. As they gathered outside City Hall, the Voices of Our City choir, made up of people experiencing homelessness, kicked off a rally. Supporters of the ballot measure say San Diego's lack of affordable housing is a crisis that's pushing more and more people out of their homes and onto the streets.
But we as a community also have a chance to do something about this crisis. The solution starts here and it starts today. It is the homelessness and affordable housing bond.
The advocates are asking the City Council to place their bond measure on the November 2020 ballot. A council committee today decided to move forward with that plan.
We've been taking a lot of steps here on this council to encourage more housing construction, but we can't get to where we need to be without a significant public investment.
Now, Ebony, the City Council's Rules Committee voted 3-2 to move this housing bond forward. Council members Chris Cate and Mark Kersey voted no. The bonds would be paid through higher property taxes, so if this measure does make it to next year's ballot, it will need a 2/3 majority from voters to pass. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Thanks, Andrew. There's new requirements for developers with projects in San Diego. The San Diego City Council on Tuesday approved a change to the city's affordable housing policies. It requires developers to pay higher fees if they do not include affordable units. The measure narrowly passed 5-4. That makes it vulnerable to a potential veto from Mayor Kevin Faulconer. Opponents say it might discourage developers from building in San Diego, while supporters say it will ensure developers build more than just luxury housing. In response to sea level rise, the California Coastal Commission has encouraged cities to consider retreating from the coast. From the KPBS Climate Change Desk, Allison St. John says the commission may now be retreating from that position.
The neighborhood is threatened by sea level rise. Del Mar's mayor, Dave Drucker, explains how the houses along the beach are actually higher than the houses in the narrow lanes behind them.
The houses at the front row in some way are protecting all the houses east of there. And that becomes problematic. If they retreat, then that basically allows the ocean to take over the whole floodplain north of Powerhouse all the way to San Diego River. And that would in turn mean that everybody would have to leave their home, and that would wipe out about 600 houses in Del Mar.
Drucker says his city has a new local coastal plan to prepare for sea level rise. It starts with importing more sand to build up the beach. The strategy called Managed Retreat is not in this plan. Managed Retreat could involve acquiring buildings in the path of the ocean and moving them inland.
Well, first of all, the numbers of properties and the expense of purchasing those properties would be extremely expensive. The question also is where would those people move? Could they move anywhere else in Del Mar? There just isn't the space.
Houses in North Del Mar can list at more than $20 million. Who would be liable for that loss if the city required property owners to retreat from the beach?
What does managed retreat mean? What's the liability of the cities and the state? And the state really needs, we believe, to weigh in on this and come up with, these are the rules of the road.
Most of us understand this is a reality that we have to deal with.
Imperial Beach Councilman Ed Spriggs had the same message for California coastal commissioners at a recent workshop for cities updating their local coastal plans, or LCPs. Spriggs says even the words managed retreat evoke fear that people will lose their homes, and that stops any rational discussion of preparing for sea level rise.
And once that has happened, it becomes very difficult in any coastal city where this becomes politicized, such as, are you going to be taking private property? Is this eminent domain, etc. Once those discussions get started, then the whole discussion of the entire LCP gets sidetracked.
Spriggs advised coastal commissioners not to require cities to include managed retreat as an option to their local coastal planning documents.
Rather, the LCP should look at projected coastal flooding. All the guidance is appropriate in terms of flood maps and overlays and city actions, etc. But we should not have the mandate of having to incorporate a form of managed retreat or planned relocation on a large scale in the LCP.
Madeline Cavalieri, Coastal Planning Manager for the Coastal Commission, says planners now accept that it will take time for people to come to grips with the data coming in about sea level rise and what it will mean.
We have made tremendous progress on understanding the vulnerabilities that are along our coastline, and our opportunities for responding to those and adapting to those. We will be able to move forward better when more people have an understanding of what the expected impacts are and what we can do about them.
But Coastal Commissioner Sarah Aminzada says she's disappointed by any move away from prioritizing managed retreat as a strategy.
I'm really looking to all of you to make it politically viable. I understand that it's putting you all in a difficult positions where your constituents don't want to hear the phrase and have a lot of very valid property rights concerns, but I think it's incumbent on all of us together to change the narrative. This is a matter of survival for these communities and public health and safety, and to make the case for why it's necessary instead of shying away from it because it feels and is, politically dangerous.
Mayor Drucker says Del Mar residents are not denying that sea level rise will happen.
Well, Del Martians will deal with it when they see the actual impacts of global warming on a more weekly, yearly basis. And until that happens, it's still theoretical.
In October, the California Coastal Commission will consider Del Mar's local coastal plan to adapt to future sea level rise. It's not clear if the commissioners will certify the plan if it does not include managed retreat. Late last year, the commission changed its recommendations on the possible sea level rise that all state agencies should prepare for by the turn of the century from 6 feet to 10 feet. Alison St. John, KPBS News.
Both Del Mar and Imperial Beach have submitted local coastal plan updates that do not include managed retreat. Democrats will debate tonight in Detroit, and now they and President Trump will need to release their tax returns to appear on the ballot here in California. Capitol Public Radio's Scott Rodd says the new law will likely face a challenge in court.
The legislation signed by Governor Gavin Newsom doesn't name President Trump, but he's been at the center of the debate. The law requires all primary candidates to release 5 years of tax returns. Newsom insists it's constitutional and will provide voters with essential information when casting their ballots.
All we're requiring is people that aspire to be president, it's not about one person, they have to disclose their tax returns, address issues of self-dealing, conflicts of interest, requiring that regardless of political party.
But elections experts say a lawsuit in federal court is all but certain. A New York law signed earlier this month that would require the release of Trump's tax returns to the state legislature remains tied up in court. Opponents say the California requirement unfairly targets President Trump and that removing his name from the ballot would amount to voter suppression. The law also applies to candidates for California governor. In Sacramento, I'm Scott Rodd.
The Trump administration wants to make it easier to bring cheaper prescription drugs into the U.S. The Department of Health and Human Services is proposing changes that will allow imports under certain circumstances. Those include imports by states or local medical professionals involved in testing. Millions of Americans receive hospice care during their last days. In fact, there are more than 4,300 hospice providers nationwide. And CDC numbers show that a little less than 40% of those are nonprofit. Here in California, the nonprofit hospice providers are joining forces. We're joined now by Jan Jones, who is the CEO of the Elizabeth Hospice here in San Diego. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us, what is the vision for the California Hospice Network?
The California Hospice Network was formed, actually 3 nonprofit programs came together to form the California Hospice Network so that we could join forces to create a network of nonprofit programs serving our local communities, keeping our local flavor so that we continue to be community-oriented as nonprofit organizations, but we also benefit from consolidation. Many businesses these days are consolidating to create economies of scale, to create best practices. That's really why we wanted to form the California Hospice Network, to gain economies of scale and to also encourage best practices amongst us.
And when you talk about best practices, what elements need to be in place for quality care?
Well, there are certain basic quality measures that we must all agree to provide and show evidence of. But we want to go beyond what's basic. We want to go beyond. So for purposes of measuring quality, we are accredited by an outside accrediting body, in our case, Joint Commission. And so that's one measure of quality. But we also want to be able to benchmark against each other and to share our best practices so that if one of us is doing something that seems to be really serving the community better, then we all want to follow that track. And so it's really an opportunity to work very closely together to improve quality for all the patients that we are blessed to serve.
And speaking of that, you mentioned that you've been in the healthcare industry for a very long time, but hospice care is very unique. Can you talk about the difference when it comes to providing the quality care for hospice patients?
Right. Hospice care is really a system of healthcare delivery that is very much patient and family oriented. We have an interdisciplinary team of individuals, nurses, doctors, social workers, chaplains, personal care aides, and volunteers who make up a team to deliver care to the person who is living with the illness as well as their family, so that their last months can be as productive as they choose them to be, and they can live their lives in the manner that they choose. And so we coordinate and manage the care, all of the care, for that person during those final months. And it really is the person who's directing us as to what that care would look like.
How will the individual hospices, as they start to join the network, become stronger?
Well, the strength will be in numbers, the fact that we will have more programs, more opportunities to consolidate back office costs will strengthen our ability to invest more in programs that are being delivered in the community. So that's a strong message. Over time, the way in which we are paid for the services that we provide by Medicare and other insurances is expected to change, and so we need to be prepared to be at the table with the payers to be able to continue to provide the kind of service that we provide. So by joining forces, it gives us an opportunity to have a better seat at the table.
And speaking of a seat at the table, any expectations that this would also lead to advocacy work?
Absolutely. we always want to be promoting legislation that would positively affect people who are living at the end of their lives. It's very, very important that this kind of specialized care continue to be available for everyone. I want it available for my grandchildren, for their grandchildren, because it's so specialized and so unique and so individualized, and that needs to be there. So advocacy definitely will be something that we will be thinking about.
Jan Jones, CEO of Elizabeth Hospice in San Diego. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ebony.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, a decade in the making. The Federal Reserve cuts interest rates for the first time in over 10 years. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
California's latest budget includes nearly $1 billion for emergency and disaster prevention. And now firefighters are getting even more help. Today, near Lake Tahoe, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order that adds nearly 400 seasonal firefighters. This as dry weather is expected in the days ahead. Paul Williams has details of tonight's forecast.
I'm meteorologist Paul Williams. There's a look at your KPBS forecast. The monsoonal moisture is still alive and very active, particularly throughout central portions of Arizona going into Utah. Now, we're not looking at that flow to cut off anytime soon. We're going to continue to see a robust amount and ample supply of moisture that's going to pump its way from the south to the north. And this is from what's been happening a little bit earlier throughout the day. Now, it's not a direct influence on us, but we are seeing just a small hint of scattered shower activity that's right off the coast occasionally, but it's looking very isolated at best. I mean, as you take a look at what's expected for this evening, going into the latter portions of going into tomorrow, we see that the moisture content right off the coast is still staying a bit on the bulky or enhanced side, but you can see the areas of green, particularly darker green, which indicates heavier showers. Well, that's going to continue to run amok for us right along the I-15 corridor, along where you see the connection with 70 and as well as 40 throughout the Four Corners region. As we put this into motion, you can see a lot of the scattered showers kind of develop and lean its way a little bit further to the north, becoming more intense there. I bring that up because it shows you the difference in the distance between that monsoonal moisture and the influence it's going to have there. Now, as we focus a little bit more so on what's happening with us, we see that moisture kissing the coast a little bit closer for us throughout the forecast period. But for tonight, we're not looking at a threat of rain at all. In fact, for tonight, 67 degrees, partly cloudy skies for this evening. For tonight, we're going to drop back to 67 in San Diego. In Oceanside, we're dropping back to 62 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Scattered cloud cover actually for us in Mountain Laguna. And dropping back to 60 for the overnight low. For Thursday, looking for seasonable temperatures, and thunderstorms are going to linger further inland, not necessarily for us. We're going to stay pretty dry as far as that's concerned. For San Diego County, we're looking for Oceanside to warm to about 79 degrees, actually. And then in Mount Laguna, we're looking for 81 for the high. By the time we get into the weekend, we're looking for this upper level high to continue to stay in place for scattered showers throughout this part of the country, but still staying very warm along the southwest. For the 5-day outlook for the coast, we're looking for 79 on Thursday, 81 by Saturday, 80 by Sunday. For inland area, 92 on Saturday, 92 on Sunday. And then as you go into the desert, we're going to peak at about 110 for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and stay there. I'm meteorologist Paul Williams with your forecast.
The Poway Post Office may soon be renamed to honor the longest living Pearl Harbor survivor who died last year at the age of 106. KPBS reporter Lynn Walsh tells us more about the plan to remember Ray Chavez.
I'm very proud that I served our country and did what little I could to help win the war.
Ray Chavez was humble when asked about his service in the Navy during World War II. Born in San Bernardino in 1912, Chavez had just finished a minesweeping mission when the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred. Throughout the war, he rose to the rank of chief and served on transport ships. Kathleen Chavez remembers her dad's service in the war and in the Poway community. She was outside the Poway post office today when Congressman Scott Peters announced his plan to rename the Midland Road location after her father.
To me, this is one of the coolest things. I'm very honored that they would consider my father for this, and I'm very honored to share his last name.
Peters introduced the bill to rename the post office in Chavez's honor in May. He says it's now backed by the entire California congressional delegation. Ray Chavez died last year at the age of 106. Humble in life and death, his daughter says this honor would surprise him.
He's probably looking down from heaven right now saying, gosh, I don't know why they're making such a big deal. I was just doing my job.
Lynn Walsh, KPBS News.
Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On KPBS Morning Edition, a spin-off from the Fast and Furious movies. Cinema junkie Beth Accomando gives us her review of Hobbs and Shaw. And on Midday Edition, a big week for movies in North County. We'll have a preview of this year's Oceanside International Film Festival. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.